In February 2026, Panama's government moved to seize back two of its own ports. Hong Kong's foreign ministry called it illegal. The company that had run those ports for decades vowed to fight it in court. And Colombia, which lost this exact piece of land more than a century ago, had already picked a side, its president on record since the dispute began, standing by Panama until the last consequences. None of this was really about two shipping ports. It was about 10 miles of jungle that has been fought over, dug through, bled for, and bargained away, again and again, for 140 years. The names change, the flags change, the fight does not. To understand why the Panama Canal keeps doing this, we have to go back to the first man who thought he could simply will it into existence. By 1880, Ferdinand de Lesseps was the most celebrated engineer alive. 11 years earlier, he had carved the Suez Canal through the Egyptian desert, rewriting global trade overnight. Now in his 70s, he was certain he could do it again, this time across the isthmus, separating the Atlantic from the Pacific. The idea was centuries old. Spanish conquistadors had dreamed of a Panama crossing since the 1500s, because whoever controlled it controlled the fastest route between two oceans. In 1879, an international congress endorsed de Lesseps' plan. In 1881, his company began work, using almost the same design that had worked in Egypt. A canal cut straight through at sea level, no locks. There was one problem: the Congress didn't weigh heavily enough. Suez was flat desert. Panama was mountains, jungle, and a river, the Chagres, that could turn from a trickle to a flood in hours. De Lesseps had the reputation and the money. What he didn't have was a plan built for the ground he was standing on. The jungle did not care about de Lesseps' reputation. Landslides buried machinery in hours. The Chagres flooded on its own schedule, erasing months of work overnight. And then came the disease. Yellow fever moved fast. Healthy in the morning, dead within days. Malaria moved slower, but just as certainly. Nobody in the 1880s knew these diseases traveled by mosquito. That theory wouldn't be confirmed for another 2 decades. The company kept building through outbreaks it didn't understand and couldn't stop. By 1889, historians estimate somewhere between 20,000 and 25,000 people died during the French effort. The range itself is a kind of evidence. Record-keeping for contract laborers was so incomplete that no one will ever know the exact toll. De Lesseps' company had burned through roughly 1.5 billion francs before collapsing into bankruptcy, and it took part of the French Republic down with it, because what happened next wasn't just a business failure. It was a political scandal that reached the highest levels of government. Company officials had bribed newspapers and politicians for years to hide the truth about its finances. When it surfaced in 1892 and 1893, roughly 100 members of parliament were implicated. A financial advisor to the company died by suicide before he could be questioned. De Lesseps was convicted, then freed on a legal technicality before serving a day. One detail almost no one includes. Briefly swept up in that scandal was Gustave Eiffel, the same man who built the tower that still defines the Paris skyline. Even France's most celebrated builder wasn't untouched by what Panama had become. One person walked away with his career intact. Philippe bunau-varilla had arrived in Panama in 1884 as a 24-year-old engineer, and within a year was running the entire French effort. When the company collapsed, he relocated to New York and reinvented himself as a lobbyist, determined to finish what France had started. He would get his chance, but the deal he was about to make would not include the one government you'd expect to be in the room. In 1902, the United States chose the Panama route over a rival plan through Nicaragua and bought out the French concession. All that was left was a deal with Colombia, which controlled Panama at the time. Colombia's Senate said no, unanimously rejecting the treaty in August 1903, holding out for more money and firmer sovereignty guarantees. Washington didn't go back to the table. On November 3, 1903, a revolt broke out in Panama against Colombian rule. One Colombian troops, blocked by American warships, could never put down. Within days, the U.S. recognized the new Republic of Panama. Then came the detail that reframes the whole story. The treaty defining American control was signed on November 18, 1903, by Philippe Bunau-Varilla, the former French engineer, acting as Panama's self-declared minister before Panama's own delegation had even arrived to negotiate for their country. Theodore Roosevelt later described his role bluntly. "I took the isthmus, started the canal, and then left Congress not to debate the canal, but to debate me." Even at the time, not everyone in America celebrated it. The New York Times called it an act of sordid conquest. The New York Evening Post called it a vulgar and mercenary venture. Construction began in 1904 and immediately met the same enemy that had beaten the French. Roosevelt's answer was Dr. William Gorgas, who had already broken yellow fever in Havana on a theory most superiors still doubted, that the disease traveled by mosquito, not filth. Gorgas's teams didn't dig, they drained water, screened windows, fumigated entire towns. It looked to skeptics funding the project like money wasted on bugs instead of dirt. By the end of 1905, yellow fever deaths in the zone had dropped to zero. But the canal's real builders were bigger than Gorgas or Roosevelt. More than 150,000 workers came from Barbados, Jamaica, and St. Lucia, inside a system the Canal Commission called the Gold Roll and the Silver Roll. Americans paid in gold-backed dollars. West Indians paid in local silver, separate pay windows, housing, hospitals. The canal connecting two oceans ran on a color line the entire way through, a story now preserved in an archive recognized by UNESCO's Memory of the World Register, one of the best documented labor histories of the era, and one of the least told. When the canal opened on August 15, 1914, the American death toll was officially just under 5,900, though historians believe the true combined total, French and American efforts together, runs closer to 25,000 to 30,000 lives. The canal didn't just move ships. It cut the journey from New York to San Francisco by roughly 8,000 miles overnight. But American control of the zone came at a cost that outlasted construction. Panamanians lived beside a strip of their own country, under a foreign flag. In 1964, riots over that flag left more than 20 dead, a flashpoint that pushed both governments toward renegotiation. It took until 1977. President Carter and Panama's Omar Torrijos signed the Torrijos-Carter Treaties, setting a fixed handover date, ratified by the U.S. Senate by a single vote. On December 31, 1999, the United States formally transferred the canal, roughly 370,000 acres, 7,000 buildings, to Panama. For the first time in nearly a century, it belonged entirely to the country it ran through. It should have been the end of the story. It wasn't the end, because the canal was never really about engineering. It was always about who controls the world's choke points. And that argument doesn't close. It just goes quiet for a few decades at a time. That's what makes 2025 and 2026 feel less like a new chapter and more like an old one. Repeating. A U.S. administration pressuring Panama over a foreign operator's influence at the ports. A Panamanian government insisting sovereignty is not up for debate. And Colombia, the country that lost this land in 1903, now standing publicly in Panama's corner. The mosquitoes are gone. The empires have changed shape. But the question de Lesseps, bunau-varilla, Gorgas, and 150,000 West Indian laborers were all fighting over is still open. Who does a canal like this actually belong to? The Panama Canal has changed hands 4 times in 140 years, and every handoff came with a body count, a betrayal, or both. If this is the kind of history you come here for, the kind that explains why today's headlines keep echoing yesterday's, subscribe. A new story drops every Thursday. The Century Desk.